All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, I would love to thank you all for joining us for today's insightful panel discussion on how Arizona is improving data management across the state. As I mentioned a couple of times, but if you're just trickling in, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. It's always nice to know who's in the Zoom room. And if you are inclined, feel free to share something you're looking forward to this year in 2024. Today's discussion will be recorded for those who cannot join us today. So just a heads up on that. My name is Allie Benson, and I lead the Data Labs initiative at the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation. I am stepping in today on behalf of Milda Oxenmataskas, who leads the State CDO Network. And unfortunately, Milda wasn't able to join us today due to unexpected travel delays. But I'm excited to be here. For those who are not familiar with the Beck Center, we are an organization based out of Georgetown University, and we focus on cultivating initiatives that encourage government to leverage data, design, technology, and policy as instruments for equitable societal change. So Michaela has added a link to the Beck Center if you're interested in learning more. The initiative that I lead is Data Labs, which is a program that brings together data and policy leaders in state government and helps them launch data sharing projects using a human-centered design approach. So we'll share more about Data Labs if that's something you're curious about. But today's event is hosted by the State Chief Data Officers Network, which the Data Labs team works really closely with, and which convenes states' chief data officers from across the country to share and scale best practices nationwide. So typically these meetings are closed door, but we decided to open up this month's meeting to a broader audience to amplify some of the data management best practices that Arizona has been leading. So with that, I would love to introduce today's speakers. We have Jeff Wolkove, who is the State Chief Data Officer for Arizona, and a longtime member of the State CDO Network, if not one of the founding members. So we've been working together for many years. Jeff actually suggested this panel and the speakers, so I'd love to thank you, Jeff, for taking the initiative to partner with us on hosting this event and sharing it with a broader audience. We also are joined today by Kyle Morton, who is the Senior Advisor for the EDM Council, Melanie Mecca, who is the founder and CDO of DataWise, and Lisa Williams, who is the Director of the Office of Data Management for Arizona's Department of Water Resources. So Jeff will be kicking off today's discussion. We'll go ahead and get his slides up, and we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A at the end of today's discussion. So I encourage you all to add your questions to the chat. My colleague Michaela and I will be tag teaming on keeping track of those, and then we'll draw from them at the end of the discussion, last like 10 or 15 minutes or so. So with that, I'll kick it off to Jeff to get us started.
Thanks, Allie. Appreciate it. Can y'all hear me okay in my slides? Great.
Yeah, sounds great.
I'm Jeff Wolkove. I'm the State Data Management Architect with the State of Arizona. I've been doing this since 2012, initially as a contractor and more recently as a full-time employee. And I've been working on developing a statewide data management program with the help of frameworks. And I want to talk to you today about how we use the framework to form the foundation of our program and give it context and buy-in and credibility. We're also very proud recently to be one of the founders of the EDM Council Data Excellence Program, which Kyle is going to be talking about a lot more later. And that really underscores some of the work that we've been doing in Arizona. So the DCAM framework is the framework that we're going to be talking about today. We used to use the data management maturity model from CMMI. They stopped supporting that a couple of years ago, and we switched over to DCAM. DCAM is being maintained very actively. There's a very active community that Kyle's going to be talking about. And what we've done is we put DCAM at the core of our program to create an ecosystem where the framework can give us consistent vocabulary, training, assessment methodology, and measurement and metrics across the state that everyone can talk about building an ecosystem around this, it's really 4 prongs that I want to talk about, or 4 pieces to this puzzle. The first are policies. Policies, you know, we all policy is a piece of paper, right? I mean, it's boring to talk about policies, but the policies are actually a tool that drives change. Where we sit, we don't get to do legislation. Rulemaking is a very complex process. Policies are more within our bailiwick, and nothing happens in state government without a piece of paper telling you that you should do it. And by basing these on a recognized framework, we're able to promote acceptance and adoption. We actually learned this many years ago when we were doing security policies. And when they weren't based on a framework, they got a lot of pushback. Where did you make this stuff up from? Why are you making us do this? By basing it on an accepted framework, you get a lot more adoption. With the policies, we have training. Training programs build literacy, accountability, and culture shift in the organization. The people are trained on implementing the policy based on the framework that it's founded on. And we have certification programs as well that empower students to lead the data management initiatives in their agencies. I'll be talking more about that in a few minutes. And the next piece is capability assessments, which answer the where do I start question. We always hear when you're starting up a data management program, where do I start? What's the roadmap? What are the priorities? What do I do? And in what order do I do it so that everything fits together the way it should? And assessments get everyone on the same page. They speak the same language. They provide an implementation roadmap and a very valuable experience for all the people who participate in it, which actually works out to be a very powerful training tool for all the people that are participating in those workshops. And the 4th piece that we have here in Arizona is the community. We have conferences, we have a steering committee. The steering committee actually has a work group that drafts the policies, so this is a continuum here of activities. And by having the community and the committee draft those policies, we get a lot better buy-in and adoption. And of course, a shared resource library, a program website, all of this contributes toward building literacy in the state and culture shift, all based on a common framework where we're all able to speak the same language. So giving an example of some of the policies that we've done, we have an organization policy that defines data stewardship and establishes the requirement to have a chief data officer in our larger agencies, a data governance council, and so on. We have a data quality policy that outlines what the steps are to take and best practices to establish data quality in the agencies. We have a specific policy about state-owned cloud data that asserts that all data belongs to the state, even though it may be with a vendor in the cloud, and that we should have unrestricted access to it. We have a documentation policy, among other things, that requires agencies to have a data catalog in place by the end of the 2025 fiscal year. We have a data interoperability policy that promotes interoperability of data exchanges. And data operations policy is under review right now, and that's going to ensure that our business intelligence operations are in keeping with best practices. And again, most of these elements are incorporated in the DCAM. There's a link on this page, and we'll share the slides later so anyone can see the actual policies on our website. On the education and training side, we have data stewardship training through our state learning management system, which has been taken now by more than 7,000 state employees. that builds data literacy and assigns the responsibility and accountability for data stewardship for those employees. And we had our first training seminar on DCAM in March last year. We had 23 students enrolled, and we had 17 certified at our last check. This is really powerful stuff because all those certified students are now the data management champions in their respective agencies. So all that is very important. We've had data management capability assessments on several of our agencies. Department of Revenue, that was the first assessment that I did with one of my colleagues. Department of Health Services, I did that assessment with Lisa. And the Department of Revenue was the first virtual assessment that we've ever done. That was with the data management maturity model. So, and the Arizona Lottery was done just last year, and Melanie will be talking about that a little bit as well. We've also built a major project data management readiness assessment out of the models. There were 84 process statements that we adapted from the two models, and we want to make sure that if an agency is going to take on a large project and spend millions of dollars on a project, we want to make sure they have the data management capabilities in place to make that successful. So this readiness assessment tests all that to make sure that they are prepared. And this will be required by our project oversight team for large data-intensive projects. So I'm going to pass it on to Kyle now. He's going to talk about the EDM Council and the DCAM, the Data Excellence Program, and a few other aspects of this program.
Yep. Thanks. Gotcha. Good morning, all. Does everyone see the screen? How am I doing?
Yep.
Looks great.
Great. First, I'd like to thank Jeff and Allie Michaela for giving us the opportunity to just kind of bring some awareness to the EDM Council. I really appreciate it. I do need to make a note that I've actually been working with Jeff for the last almost 10 years, I think, in this data management space, and he's a big champion of his, and he's a big champion of data management. So it's been a pretty impressive run, and excited to keep that going. My intent here is just to kind of put in context the EDM Council. You're going to hear a lot about the DCAM framework, and I'll let the experts kind of speak directly to that. But I wanted to make everyone here aware of the council itself and where I think it can drive value over and above even the DCAM frameworks. And we'll talk about a couple of those ideas. First, I won't read everything, but in a nutshell, we're a nonprofit trade association focused specifically on data management, and that's managing data as an asset, right? So we're not focused on technology or solutions. We're about, to Jeff's point, policy, procedure, culture, things of that nature that are critical, especially in today's world, you know, as the data and the tools advance, you know, at light speed, that you have the basics of your data management fundamentals under control so that you can deliver accurate, accessible, and available data across the board. I will tell you, I learned a ton in working with Jeff about the challenges that brings in a state organization. And it's been interesting to see how we've navigated through to help advance a lot of that work. So know that we're a nonprofit. Our goal really, our goal is to advance the best practices of data management across the globe. Been around for now almost 18 years. We are worldwide. We've got references and members across the board. And our goal really is to be kind of the sounding board and sandbox of creation and innovation for data management best practices. So I've just pulled out here, we have about 380 corporate members, so we're a corporate member organization. These are kind of the government and regulator side of things, specific to the states currently, the United States. We have a fair amount of federal government presence, and we're trying to grow that. The state government is where we're focusing on as well, and we're hoping that we can create some interest and have some questions draw out of this group about what we do and how we do it and how we can be a benefit even over and above the DCAM, and you'll hear about our cloud framework as well. So again, in a nutshell, here's these are our core areas of activities, right? Best practices, we'll touch briefly on the DCAM and the CDMC and some on the special interest groups. We help to drive standards. I'll touch very briefly on our data innovation lab, which is a really interesting turn on things with a lot of focus and great stories regarding knowledge graph. I don't know if how many folks are taking a look at the knowledge graph in the ontology world, but that's really exploding. We've got some interesting stories to tell there. Jeff mentioned that there's training around our frameworks, and we also provide training in a broader swath of data management through a partner. So we can help spin people up and support that. We do research and benchmarking. You may or may not be aware, we do a data management global benchmark about every 18 months or so, and we've just initiated a cloud data management survey as well. This is available right now to all folks, so we can get that out to you if there's interest. But it's really been a kind of a bellwether for our organization, for groups to take a look at how they're doing and how they're doing, compared to others, to regions, areas, industries, things of that nature. We do engage with regulators. We are not a lobbying firm at all. In fact, what we serve to provide regulators education from the data management world and data management professionals about, sane and relevant and achievable regulations, and informing them about how and where and what you might want to think about in doing so. Conversely, they also listen to us as they see the things that we're doing, and they'll come to us for some insight, education, thoughts, availabilities as well. So we really want to make this work for the entire world, commercially and the public sector as well. And last but certainly not least, networking, right? The data management community is a small one but growing, and it's one where it's really important to have others to bounce ideas and thoughts and challenges, and especially like this, successes for, because it's really it's a hard job out there. And to date, I'll get to our data management excellence program. To date, there really hasn't been any recognition for achievement at the organizational level for data management, and we're looking to change that. Okay, so real quick, I mentioned some of the industry collaboration and networking. We've got special interest groups. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll highlight that the ASG group is really active. I will tell you that. Data ROI as well. The Data Innovation Lab, think of that as knowledge graph focused work at the moment, but it'll become more. And we have some very interesting thought leadership forums that are all available to both members and non-members in participation. So connecting and networking is really a big part of our organization's thrust. Mentioned training. Within that training is certification. There's certification around our frameworks, but there's also training, as I mentioned, and certification available through e-learning in a broader array of data management skills and abilities. All this is done at a discounted rate. So we talked briefly, I'm just going to touch on this. We've got the DCAM, the Data Management Capability Assessment Model. This has been in the market for probably 8 or 9 years at least, right? And in fact, it ran in parallel, as Jeff knows, with the Data Management Maturity Model. And the DMM was sunsetted now 2 years ago. And candidly, it left just the DCAM as a really valid, vendor-independent, business-built capability model that could be used as a roadmap and also as a measuring tool across the board. So in reality, this is the really only the game in town for a vendor neutral, business created framework to help you advance your businesses. And so the idea is understanding what you have, what you need to do, and how you go about it. And then, as Jeff mentioned, the model itself provides that common methodology, common approach, and again, a common measurement scheme to help you measure the organization, certainly benchmark currently, and then growth and progression over time. Again, built by the business, for the business, in business terms. I'll highlight this one thing from a public sector's perspective. The Office of Inspector General for the Federal Reserve, in its report, actually endorsed the use of DCAM as a standard tool. That was a unique acknowledgement that we were very happy about. That recognizes, what we do and how we do it is an interesting framework to build your approaches on. Now, secondarily, we have an additional model that's called the Cloud Data Management Model, the CDMC, Cloud Data Management Capability. And this model was created to protect your sensitive data in the cloud. I won't go into detail with this, but this is a newly launched model that was launched about 2 years ago. And it was a really interesting story. It actually came from Morgan Stanley and and I think LSAG came together, and Google actually came together and realized that getting data and protecting data in the cloud tended to be kind of a really bespoke thing, which cost a lot of money, took a lot of time, and was quite frustrating. So Google and a couple others actually came to the council and said, hey, let's see if we can put together a model to help that transition into the cloud and the management of data in the cloud itself. And so that's how the CDMC was born. Over the last year and a half, it was developed, and now we have organizations certified, but the core groups driving this were AWS, Google, and Microsoft. Snowflake was one of the first to be invented, to be assessed. IBM was involved in terms of the initial growth as well. So we have a lot of energy being put towards the cloud model as well, and both Microsoft and Google are certified on this, and AWS has been assessed in the framework. So lots of interesting things to be said. Take a lot more time to kind of talk through it, but know that there's an additional framework out there to help on the cloud world as well. So let me get, if I can, quickly to the Data Excellence Program. And again, congratulations to Jeff and Arizona for being a founder member. The short story is that we, whoops, wait a minute. What happened here? Sorry. Here we go. Sorry, we'll just pull it up. We've created a program that's to be launched in February, of which Arizona is a founding or pilot member of the program. And its goal really is to elevate the visibility and recognition of data management at the organizational level. And I'll go through this quickly, and it doesn't take too long, even my formal presentation. But in the end, having been in this space with Jeff and candidly with Melanie, worked with her for that time as long as well, is we're always facing the challenge of getting funding and securing funding for data management. If we get that, it's usually measured in a project and not a program capacity, which is really frustrating. And even if you get those two things, there's no formal a recognition for your achievement or ability of data management at the organizational level. So our solution is this Data Excellence Program, again, a recognition program that identifies organizations that have committed to and have achieved levels of data management at an organizational level, right? So the program itself is designed to define the data management journey. Had a lot of conversations with our end members that said, hey, I need someone to help me tell the story of where I'm going with data management, right? What's the roadmap? What are the measurables? Where do I get with this? Because there's nothing out there. So we're defining that journey. And in doing so, we're elevating the importance and significance and the achievements and contributions of data management to all the enterprise, right? It's just critical to have the foundational right data to get going. And then as a framework, based off of the framework, it provides the ability to do apples to apples and consistent measurement within your organization, across your organization, and again, across the industry and the globe. So we're trying to fill that void. There's plenty of certifications for data stewards, data scientists, data architects. There's data, data lakes, data lodges, data townhouses. Everything's identified as data, except for data management at the organizational level. And so that's the goal for the Data Excellence Program. The requirements are pretty simple. This is an annual program, and we've done that to reemphasize the fact that this is a program, that it is ongoing and it needs to be sustainable. And you'll see in our next slide briefly that we have 4 or 5 elements to the measurement of this program. So it's an annual program. You'll need to be aligned with a certified partner. I can get into some details on that, but that's pretty low key. But it's important to have an independent third party represent that you're meeting the requirements. So when the time's right, hopefully we can talk more about where that fits. And this does require membership. And what I'll say is that membership is pretty nominal for state organizations, and would love to have the opportunity to talk more about all the benefits of the council itself, and especially the Data Excellence Program. As an interest to wrap up here, just get us out on edmcouncil.org. You can reach out to me as well at any time, and obviously Jeff and the others will know how to get a hold of me. So with that, I'll turn it over to Melanie next, I think.
You have to stop sharing. Okay, very good. Hello, everyone. I think so far our handoffs have been pretty clear. Okay, if there's any trouble hearing me or seeing my screen, someone let me know. So I'm going to focus on a little bit more about the how-to of doing an assessment using the DCAM framework. And I'm not going to go into my background, but there it is for you to look at later. I'll just say that I've been involved with developing first the DMM and now working on the DCAM 3 and contributed to the DIMBOK as well. So I've been on frameworks for a long time. And I'll just point out that DataWise is on the GSA schedule with our data management products and services. There is my website at the bottom. There is my LinkedIn profile, and there is my email. I'd be very happy to answer any questions that weren't addressed in the question period. Okay, so I'm going to just level set quickly about what are the elements of an enterprise data management program in terms of these frameworks and best practices, why you should conduct an assessment, and then talk about navigating the assessment. What are the typical phases, activities, the scoring, when is a good time to assess your organization, what the assessment report typically looks like, and options if you don't want to commit to a full assessment. And one slide about DCAM education. And then, since I usually speak for much longer time, I have given you appendices, handouts basically, about the DCAM framework, the 2023 Global Data Management Benchmark, and if you're using the DMM in your organization now, some hints for transitioning from the DMM to the DCAM. So, and looking at that diagram, data problems often cause business problems and vice versa. And you all know that very well, right? If you're into Six Sigma or doing business process improvement, you will find data issues and so on. If you're working on data, you will find business process tweaks that you need to make. So it's highly related. So what are the elements of the data management program? So you launch it when you understand that data is a strategic asset and that you need to manage it well, forever, because the data is forever. So we need a scope definition. Are we going to include the lawnmower maintenance tiny access system in our umbrella of what we're going to focus on? Probably not. So you need a scope definition for what is the enterprise data that you're going to want to manage. What is your vision for the target state? Perfect data, perfect management, perfect quality. Who's going to lead this effort? How you prioritize activities and capability building? You need to have your staff up to speed so they can help you develop and sustain the program. You need active engagements from the business units. I know everyone would agree with me, data governance is critical. You need to know a plan. What are the initiatives I'm going to do to build my capabilities? You need standard work products, as Jeff pointed out for Arizona, policies, processes, standards that make sense. You need to have metrics and monitor your progress because you're always having to prove the value of the program to the head of your agency or to your board if you're a commercial entity. What did we get out of this? What kind of progress have you made? Show me the benefit. So metrics are very useful. And then of course you need corresponding technology, resources, and platforms. If you do that, then you have launched an integrated transformation engine, which will be evolving and developing for many years, and you'll be doing a much better job with your data. So the assessment gives you clarity. It answers these questions. I'm not going to list them, but it is extremely useful. When we first started promoting the DMM, we said, if you're a new chief data officer, assess your organization as a starting point for your whole plan. So let's say you're going to do an assessment, and the ones I've done have typically been at the detailed level. In the DCAM, that would be sub-capabilities, and the translation for that is requirements, specific requirements. So you're going to determine the scope for your assessment, and I'll talk more about scoping in a minute or two. So phase one is your work as an organization. How do you prepare, and what work do you have to do to be ready for the phase two, which is an intensive week of workshops, interviews, and work product reviews. And then phase three essentially is the people who are helping you and leading your assessment go off and hide themselves in a corner and build this report, this voluminous and both tactical and strategic report from the ground up. If you want to learn more about this, I've put a link there to my latest article on Dataversity, conducting a DCAM assessment. So that link will take you to about a 3,500 word article on doing it. But what's in the different steps? So first is your preparation. So who's going to be on my assessment team in my agency? Who are the key stakeholders? And who are going to participate in the surveys, or if you're using my method, the workshops, the consensus workshops. You set up the workshops and interviews and do your internal communications. And if you want your work products reviewed, you gather them up, which is somewhat time consuming, which is why your preparation is usually 4 to 6 weeks. During the assessment week, we interrogate your capabilities practice by practice together and come up with an assessment about where they score, which I will address momentarily. We interview executives and senior staff to find out key problems, key aspirations, and get business context for the data management capabilities and look at the work products. Then the report, we're working with the examples we got in the workshops and interviews. We are analyzing the scores. So we're identifying a bunch of things. One, specific improvements, like you didn't do well on identify the data at that particular practice. So we will be saying what you should be doing in this element of detailed activity, and this one, and this one. And we will probably be suggesting, you should have a policy for data quality, etc. You should have a standard for business glossary terms. We'll give you lots and lots of recommendations that are actionable. And then we will also come up with project efforts, like beginning, middle, and an end, initiatives that establish these capabilities and sequence them into a multi-year roadmap. So it's very intense. Now, scoring. Let me just spend a little time on scoring. We're working now in the partner group for the council to clarify the scoring even further so that we can get more and more consistency about how it's scored. But everything in red is you are on the way to start developing capabilities. So at 1, you don't have anything. At 2, you're speaking about it conceptually and you have it in some kind of plan to address. If you score a 3, you have some kind of engagement underway to develop the capability. For example, we're writing a data governance charter for our senior executive body, or we are writing a data quality profiling process. And then at 4, you have finished that development effort. It is fully approved by stakeholders at all levels. You've taken on input and you are ready to launch. So when you're in level 5 score achieved, you are implementing and rolling this out across the scope of the organization that was assessed. And you've also put in a plan for compliance. How do I make sure people are following the policy, doing the process? And at level 6, you are in the nirvana phase. So everything is business as usual. You know, you are continuously improving and tweaking your communication, your processes, your standards as required. So, I hate animations. Okay. Now, the assessment report, it's typically a big report. So the last one I did was for Arizona Lottery with the DCAM. And that one was about 127 pages, as Jeff mentioned, because the report is developed from the ground up. So we talk about what we did, who was involved. Here is a summary, charts, tables, and analysis of how you scored. Also, we take a notion of organizational themes that are impacts to the program. You get the detailed findings along with the accompanying scoring mechanism with the notes. You get a slate of initiatives with a recommended sequence plan. If we were you, we would do this in this order, and identified quick wins. So, and a briefing. So it's a lot of value. I've had organizations use these roadmaps and strategy reports for years. For example, the first one I did was the Securities and Exchange Commission with the DMM, and years later, they would come up to me at conferences and say, we are still implementing those projects because they had a lot of them. So when do you assess your program? I'm not going to read this slide, but definitely you want a data management strategy, do the assessment because it gives you all the detail you need. Putting governance together, expanding analytics, architecture transformations, data quality programs, implementing a data catalog or putting a data lake out or something like that. It's always good to see where you are so you know what you have to do. Okay, what if you can't commit to a full detailed assessment? So you can't get the buy-in internally, or you have budget problems. So there's different ways to go. One, you don't have to do the detailed practices. You can do it at the capability level, which is at the 38 capabilities, the same as the benchmark. And a good example of this approach was the state of Maryland, who this year completed an assessment at the capability level of 25 agencies. And they discovered a lot of good practices that some of the agencies were doing. Now they're working one-on-one with each of the 25 agencies to develop a tailored roadmap aligned with their business goals. And Pat McLaughlin is on the call, so he can be happy to tell you more about that. But I will say the last thing is they're doing the same thing that Jeff has done for Arizona, developing policies for data governance, data quality, privacy, and metadata. So great work, Maryland. So you can do it at the capability level. You can do an executive benchmark evaluation, which is one workshop with senior staff who know the data. You get a report. It's at the capability or benchmark level, and it's quick and high value and low cost. You can also scope an assessment by the business line or a vertical business line, for example, human resources, or a horizontal program for many business lines like the enterprise data lake or data warehouse. And then you can also chop the DCAM up. Let's say you're only interested in quality and governance out of the 8 components. You can limit the assessment to those things. But whatever you do, you're going to get a lot of good information and actionable results. My last slide is this one, and then it goes into the handouts, which you will all get. So, I recommend an instructor-led DCAM course because the DCAM is like an aircraft carrier. So I developed a course with Jeff Wolkove's input, which was taught in spring 2023, that adds 6 hours to the standard course. So it's all certified. You're able to take the certification exam, but it adds individual team and group exercises and concept fixing exercises. So it's highly interactive. And I think it's a very good thing to do if you're trying to build your program and gain knowledge and advocacy among your key stakeholders. Okay, and with that, I will stop sharing and turn it over to Lisa.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sound great.
And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so my name's Lisa Williams, and I'm not the director, sadly. I'm only the manager of the Office of Enterprise Data Management for the Arizona Department of Water Resources. And our mission there is to protect, conserve, and enhance Arizona's water supplies. And as you probably know from the news for the past several years, we have our work cut out for us. We're in the 24th year of drought, and we're experiencing Colorado River shortages. So of course, reliable data is extremely important when it comes to negotiations and planning. And I'm going to share with you some of the benefits we realized from implementing a data management framework. And we implemented the data management maturity model, but we are transitioning over to the DCAM. But all of the things that I'm going to explain to you would have been realized from the DCAM as well. So back in 2017, no one at our agency had any idea there was any such thing as enterprise data management. And so we were, this whole entire world of practices and categories and disciplines were opened up to us. And I was trying to learn about that. And I did go to webinars and conferences and trying to learn as I went. But really, the best thing I did was attend a data management maturity model boot camp put on by Melanie and sponsored by Jeff. And in that way, we were able to better understand categories of practices that we could explain to our superiors, like data governance, data quality, and that sort of a thing. And the other thing that happened early on, before we even started our enterprise data management program, is that Jeff, as he mentioned before, handed down a data governance policy. And I explained to our director at the time that we were going to be required to adhere to that policy just like we would any IT security policy. And so data governance that came from a framework, that policy came from the framework, was one of our justifications for starting our enterprise data management program. And another thing that we were able to convince the director to do was to allow us to have an actual data management maturity assessment. And as Jeff mentioned, we like to brag, we were the first state of Arizona agency to have that done. We beat out corrections. And it was a very, very good experience for us because we had 2 outside experts, including Melanie, come into our agency and diagnose for us our weaknesses and our strengths. So these were objective outside experts in the field that were able to do this. I still to this day can't believe that our medium-sized agency was able to take advantage of a tool that people like NASA and Microsoft and other people get to use. So that assessment provided a beginning score for us, which was about a 1.5 as our benchmark. And then it gave us a goal of 3.0 to achieve. And over the years, we're up now to about a 2.9 or so, but we will be converting over and probably doing a DCAM assessment before long because it's been a while since we did this. And we continued to, as we implemented practices, which I'll talk about more on the next slide, we continued to keep track of our score so that we could continue to show progress to our director to continue justifying the program. The other thing that our roadmap or that our assessment provided was the roadmap, which Melanie mentioned, of how to implement a program. I was a water resource manager. I had no clue, as I said before, so the roadmap was invaluable to us. And it included some things we could implement as quick wins to get people really on board and excited about the program. And then the last thing I'll mention here is that the roadmap and report advised us to use a data warehouse proof of concept project we were about to start as the vehicle to implement the things on our roadmap. And that's very important. You need to be able to show the business the value of doing this, because nobody's just going to do data governance for the sake of data governance. They have to see how it pays off in their everyday business lives. So I'll talk a little bit about how we implemented our roadmap. We did create, and again, all of this was directly from the DMM framework, all the practices we did, and it was all centered around keep starting up management strategy, and we started some data governance groups. And we did not try to bring the entire agency in at once. We only brought in the business units that were having their data sets added to the data warehouse. So they had really a reason to participate and learn, and we could teach them about data governance and data quality at that time. And we also required every unit who was bringing a data set in to develop a mini data quality strategy for that data set, to not just introduce them to data quality, but to be sure the data we were bringing in was fit for use, right? Because this data is on our web for the world to see. And then we started up a business glossary. This is also very important. And we required everyone bringing data into the data warehouse to define their terms, and we added those to the business glossary. And then the last thing we did is we established the data management office with me leading that. We're very small still, but it has made a difference in our everyday lives. And I think people would be very upset if our office went away. And so now I'd kind of like to come up a little bit more to some more recent time. By the time we got to about 2021 or 2022, we could not really make any more progress in terms of our maturity score. And the reason why is because we were completely lacking in our metadata management program. That was not an element that they talked about in the roadmap or the report, and it's one that, frankly, I just couldn't even face. I had no idea where to start. It just seems so incredibly overwhelming. But if you study a framework, you will learn that there are relationships between the categories and dependencies, so that you can only go so far in data governance and data quality without good metadata management, and vice versa. They really all work together. So I was able to demonstrate to our directorate that we weren't going to make any more progress unless we did something about metadata management, and we were able to purchase a data catalog tool. Now, we're a medium-sized agency. We don't have a ton of money, but we were able to do that as a proof of concept to get our actual data in there. And it was helpful to be able to use the framework to help justify that, because it's difficult to do ROI in state government, at least from my perspective. So we implemented that data catalog tool, and one of the very first things we did is we used it to implement phase 1 of Jeff's data quality policy a couple of years ago. So for each business unit, we took some of their standard work or their standard operating procedures. We found the critical data elements, and we created data quality rules inside the data catalog. And so that in that way, we began to introduce to everyone in the agency the concept of how you use a data catalog. But the most important thing we've done, and the thing we're in the thick of right now, is that we are doing an application modernization project at our agency. So we're taking about 10 or 12 of our legacy Oracle databases. So our database that holds all the drilled wells in the state of Arizona, our database that has depth to water, our database with grandfathered rights. We're all consolidating those onto a Salesforce platform. And so in preparation for that project, we started tagging every field on every paper form that we have, and also online forms and in scripts, so that when the consultant came in, we could tell them right away where specific data elements were as those processes move online. And in fact, we've even given the consultant's data architect a license to IoTahoe, or IoTahoe is our data catalog. And we've used it to make mapping and data lineage and all of that so much easier. And once we start migrating data over, we'll create new data quality rules to track the data in the new system. So having the data catalog's been a game changer, but we wouldn't have the data catalog if it were not for the fact that we had the framework to help us understand the relationships and the need for metadata management. And so I feel like I've been talking really fast here. I'll take a breath, but I will conclude by saying that first of all, we'd be still in the dark ages if it weren't for Jeff and Melanie. I'm so glad, because we really do have a lot of very critical need for data right now in our state in terms of water. But the last thing I'll say is that if I'm ever asked to start up another enterprise data management program, my question is going to be, okay, you do know we're going to be using the DCAM, and my second question or statement will be, when are we having our assessment? Because there's no way on earth, especially me, just a water resource manager, could have, with help from my agency, implemented a program that was a success and that is sustainable without a framework. And so that's how I'll wrap up my presentation. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Jeff, and Melanie and Lisa and Kyle, who unfortunately had to drop. But with that, we will open up the discussion for Q&A. I would say we have time for about 1 or 2 questions. So if you do have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like to ask it.
That was a lot of information in just a short period of time. I think I'm glad we got through all of it. But there were a couple of questions here that I already answered. The membership for the CDM Council is a single membership fee for the entire state. So agencies don't have to join on their own. Each state, each employee in the state has access.
Yes, and if you
to
talk to Kyle
whatever
Morton,
resources the CDM Council has available.
he'll be happy to give you more information about membership. But for federal and state agencies, it's extremely low membership fee. I encourage all states to join it. And if you join it soon, you can help us with the DCAM 3.0. So you can have input into the new version of the framework.
That's great. Scott, it looks like you have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. So this is for Jeff and or Pat, given that both of your states have had some success here. I guess the question is just, from a cultural setup perspective in your states, right? Are you guys more centralized, or is it more decentralized as far as, decisions being at the department level versus the statewide level? Because if you, Lisa made the comment, for instance, that, we beat corrections, right? So that tells me that you got departments that are really engaged here, right, trying to get this done. Whereas other states might have a more decentralized culture, and you might have some departments like, yeah, I want in, others are like, nah, I'm gonna do my own thing. So how did you go about getting that buy-in, I guess? And do you think you have a decentralized culture, or was it already centralized, so it wasn't much of a concern?
I think Jeff got disconnected temporarily because he was frozen. I can just say from the assessment point of view, until he comes back, you can definitely do this at the agency level or one mission area or one, program level. So if you are highly decentralized, like Arizona Department of Economic Services will put together from 9 different programs. You can do it program by program or enterprise-wide. Jeff, you had a question. Did you hear the question?
No, I got kicked off for some reason and I just got back in.
Can you repeat the question for Jeff?
Sure. I mean, Jeff basically just said that if you got a more, I was asking both you and Pat, right? Do you guys have more centralized versus decentralized culture as far as data goes in your states, right? And especially if it's, how did that affect your success with this? Especially if you're more decentralized, right? How did you get everybody on board across the park?
Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing you, but yeah,
Hey, Jeff, I was able to hear. So Scott was asking the question, whether we have a more centralized or decentralized approach to data management, data governance, and how does that affect the work in implementation?
In Arizona, each agency is independent. They could do whatever they want. We coordinate that through the ADOA, the Department of Administration, through our policies, and provide leadership and oversight to their projects. So our ability to influence how they implement these practices is limited by our statutory obligations and authority. Primarily, if we have an oversight program where if they're going into a very large program, a very large project, they have to submit a project investment justification and have that approved by our oversight team. We want them to make sure, at that point, we want to make sure that they are implementing best practices as part of that project. So from the point of view of centralizing, that's really the extent of it at this point. Does that answer the question?
But you
Dave,
might
do you
want
want
to
to add anything?
mention your multi-agency data governance group, your steering committee.
Yeah, I know we're close to time. Pat, do you want to weigh in here? Try to get off me too.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in if Jeff, you're done, or if you had a follow-up, I can hold off until you're done.
I think
Sorry,
you can go
I'm
ahead,
having
Pat.
trouble with my audio here.
Okay.
We have about 1 minute, so if you want to give like a brief summary.
So we are not fully centralized in the state of Maryland, but our approach to this, to the DCAM assessment, was one that was centralized. So the chief data office is not embedded in an individual agency. It's part of the governor's office. So part of the responsibility is having kind of the responsibility for setting strategic direction and being able to kind of work collaboratively to get all of the agencies to work together. In the case of a lot of the initiatives we've carried out over the course of the last 18 months, and specific DCAM here today, it was seen as a statewide effort. But it was a partnership between the governor's office, and then the heavy lifting was really done by the Department of Information Technology. So they manage the contract and manage the day-to-day operations of getting the DCAM assessment kind of stood up and carried out. So while the Department of Information Technology is one of the agencies, they really participated as like the centralized kind of component to getting all the other agencies as part of the participation group. So, and we had, as was mentioned before by Melanie, we had 25 agencies. We had, I think, 360 plus invited attendees, and we had over 250 or 260 people complete the assessment. So we had a pretty broad group across the entirety of the executive branch participating in it. So centralized model and delivery, but our overall state structure is not completely centralized.
Great, thank you for sharing that, Pat. We are at time, so unfortunately we'll have to wrap up. Christy, I know you have a question in the chat. We've taken note of it, and we're happy to put you in touch with the speakers for a follow-up communication. But in the meantime, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. Thank you again to today's speakers and to Jeff for initiating this discussion. As I mentioned, this event will be recorded, so we'll share out that recording and a recap and some of the tools and resources discussed today. The State CDO Network is part of the Digital Service Network, which supports a much broader community of digital service practitioners in state, local, tribal, and territorial government. So if you are interested in future events like this, I encourage you to sign up for the DSN. Michaela dropped a link in the chat. And with that, I will say thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
And Melanie and Lisa and Kyle, who unfortunately had to drop. But with that, we will open up the discussion for Q&A. I would say we have time for about 1 or 2 questions. So if you do have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like to ask it.
That was a lot of information in just a short period of time. I think I'm glad we got through all of it. But there were a couple of questions here that I already answered. The membership for the CDM Council is a single membership fee for the entire state. So agencies don't have to join on their own. Each state, each employee in the state has access
Yes, and if you
to
talk to Kyle
whatever
Morton,
resources the CDM Council has available.
he'll be happy to give you more information about membership, but for federal and state agencies, it's extremely low membership fee. I encourage all states to join it. And if you join it soon, you can help us with the DCAM 3.0. So you can have input into the new version of the framework.
That's great. Scott, it looks like you have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. So this is for Jeff and or Pat, given that both of your states have had some success here. I guess the question is just, from a cultural setup perspective in your states, right? Are you guys more centralized or is it more decentralized as far as, decisions being at the department level versus the statewide level? Because if you, Lisa made the comment, for instance, that, we beat corrections, right? So that tells me that you got departments that are really engaged here, right, trying to get this done. Whereas other states might have a more decentralized culture, and you might have some departments like, yeah, I want in. Others are like, nah, I'm gonna do my own thing. So how did you go about getting that buy-in, I guess? And do you think you have a decentralized culture, or was it already centralized, so it wasn't much of a concern?
I think Jeff got disconnected temporarily because he was frozen. I can just say from the assessment point of view, until he comes back, you can definitely do this at the agency level or one mission area or one, program level. So if you are highly decentralized, like Arizona Department of Economic Services will put together from 9 different programs. You can do it program by program or enterprise-wide. Jeff, you had a question. Did you hear the question?
No, I got kicked off for some reason and I just got back in.
Can you repeat the question for Jeff?
Sure. Jeff basically just said that if you got a more, I was asking both you and Pat, right? Do you guys have more centralized versus decentralized culture as far as data goes in your states, right? And especially if it's, how did that affect your success with this? Especially if you're more decentralized, right? How did you get everybody on board across departments?
Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing you, but yeah,
hey, Jeff, I was able to hear. So Scott was asking the question, whether we have a more centralized or decentralized approach to data management, data governance, and how does that affect the work in implementation?
In Arizona, each agency is independent. They could do whatever they want. We coordinate that through the ADOA, the Department of Administration, through our policies and provide leadership and oversight to their projects. So our ability to influence how they implement these practices is limited by our statutory obligations and authority. Primarily, if we have an oversight program where if they're going into a very large program, a very large project, they have to submit a project investment justification and have that approved by our oversight team. We want them to make sure, at that point, we wanted to make sure that they are implementing best practices as part of that project. So from the point of view of centralizing, that's really the extent of it at this point. Does that answer the question?
But you
Steve,
might
do you
want
want
to
to add anything?
mention your multi-agency data governance group, your steering committee.
Yeah, I know we're close to time. Pat, do you want to weigh in here? Try to get off mute too.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in if Jeff, you're done, or if you had a follow-up, I can hold off until you're done.
I think you
Sorry,
can go
I'm
ahead,
having
Pat.
trouble with my audio here.
Okay.
We have about 1 minute, so if you want to give like a brief summary.
So we are not fully centralized in the state of Maryland, but our approach to this, to the DCAM assessment, was one that was centralized. So the chief data office is not embedded in an individual agency. It's part of the governor's office. So part of the responsibility is having kind of the responsibility for setting strategic direction and being able to kind of work collaboratively to get all of the agencies to work together. In the case of a lot of the initiatives we've carried out over the course of the last 18 months, and specific DCAM here today, it was seen as a statewide effort. But it was a partnership between the governor's office, and then the heavy lifting was really done by the Department of Information Technology. So they manage the contract and manage the day-to-day operations of getting the DCAM assessment kind of stood up and carried out. So while the Department of Information Technology is one of the agencies, they really participated as like the centralized kind of component to getting all the other agencies as part of the participation group. So, and we had, as was mentioned before by Melanie, we had 25 agencies. We had, I think, 360 plus invited attendees, and we had over 250 or 260 people complete the assessment. So we had a pretty broad group across the entirety of the executive branch participating in it. So centralized model and delivery, but our overall state structure is not completely centralized.
Great, thank you for sharing that, Pat. We are at time, so unfortunately we'll have to wrap up. Christy, I know you have a question in the chat. We've taken note of it, and we're happy to put you in touch with the speakers for a follow-up communication. But in the meantime, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. Thank you again to today's speakers and to Jeff for initiating this discussion. As I mentioned, this event will be recorded, so we'll share out that recording and a recap and some of the tools and resources discussed today. The State CDO Network is part of the Digital Service Network, which supports a much broader community of digital service practitioners in state, local, tribal, and territorial government. So if you are interested in future events like this, I encourage you to sign up for the DSN. Michaela dropped a link in the chat. And with that, I will say thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.